Good morning. My name is Steve Oliphant. I'm Matty Terrell's puppy. My background is that I'm from a small town in western Pennsylvania, Beaver, 6,000 in population, located on the Ohio River about 25 miles west of Pittsburgh. A community that is centered in a county which was traditionally a steel industry county. Beaver is a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant community, period. Very few Catholics, 3 Jewish families when I was growing up, no shuls, no synagogues. Those were in the surrounding communities, which were primarily steel mill communities. The merchants of Beaver were primarily Jewish merchants who came from the surrounding community for their retail stores and the other facilities which they provided for the community.
Can you tell me a little bit about your family?
My family was a small family. My father and mother and one older brother consisted of that nuclear family. I had other family within the community. My grandfather had been a druggist and had raised his children, actually three daughters, which uniquely so at that time in the early 1920s, he provided all three of them with a college education, which was beneficial because my father died at age 51. I was 13, and my mother had the background of having been trained as a librarian and was able, within a couple of months, and a very necessary couple of months, to secure a librarian's job. The church was, as it was for most people in Beaver, a critical part not just of the religious dimension, but there was a church league baseball league, there was a church league basketball league. But the key was that most people, and certainly our family, went to church on a regular basis. I went to Sunday school on a regular basis. I went to Bible school in the summer on a regular basis. I, was baptized and then eventually, confirmed in a church which was very traditional for my family's background, which was Scottish, and that was the Presbyterian Church. My father was very active in going himself to Sunday school, so everything about our lives, and most lives at that time, focused really around the church and that religious experience. And the value system which evolved within our family and really within the community was one of self-discipline and kind of the Protestant ethic in the process.
Were there any times during your childhood that you remember seeing any prejudice towards Jews within your family?
In reading some of the letters that my father, who then lost his job in the Depression down in Texas and Oklahoma, and came back and had to work as a steel mill laborer, and fortunately to get that job during the Depression. Some of the letters which he had written to his mother at that time when business was bad and they did not know where their next order was going to come from at Jones and Lockwood Steel, where he worked. He wrote about, there's talk about putting out the Jews. And I never quite understood then, what that letter was all about. But as I reflect on it, I think it was just some group being singled out, not by him, but by the general public as being a group that was going to be discriminated against, because in the Depression, the unemployment level was 25%.
After high school, I know that you proceeded to go to college. Where did you go, and what was it like for the people in your community to have enough money to be able to go?
After high school, and high school was kind of a easy situation for me. I played football and baseball for 4 years and basketball for 2 years, and was fortunate enough to receive an all-tuition scholarship to go to Washington and Jefferson College, where my brother had preceded me. And that experience really then provided me an exposure to Judaism, in the sense that we were a small liberal arts men's college. And the students that were there were probably 25% Jewish. Most of them were pre-med students. Most of them came from New York City environment. A lot of them came, they'd never been to campus to visit W&J. They came on a bus, and the bus dropped them off at the campus, or they took a train to Pittsburgh and took a streetcar from Pittsburgh to Washington, and they dropped them off on the campus. Nobody took them around to see what the campus looked like. Their parents, knowing that this was a good school and they wanted to be physicians, this is where they came. Many of those young men became my friends in college, and two of them continued to be very close friends of mine, to this day. The scholarship that I was fortunate to receive was sponsored by 5 Jewish brothers, the Luria brothers, from the Luria Steel Trading Company in New York City. And part of that experience was every Easter we went by Pullman sleeper car to New York. There were 5 of us on that scholarship, and we had 4 Broadway shows that we went to, 3 nights in the hotel, $20 to spend, and also had lunch at either the Yale Club or the Waldorf Astoria with 2 or 3 of the brothers and their very beautiful wives from Connecticut. But the experience in the fraternity system at a college at that time was very exclusionary, and not troubling to people because they accepted that. The experience in the fraternity system was really pretty simple. If you were Jewish, if you were African American, you didn't get into the fraternities. In my case, our fraternity was as rigid as any fraternity at that time. They had what was called a blackball system, which meant everybody voted, and if one person dropped a black ball as compared to white balls, which were used for voting, that person didn't get in the fraternity. So it wasn't a majority rule. It was excluding all people. Now, there was a young man, Digi Hirschberg from the Keysport, who I was able to convince the membership at that time that since he had not been bar mitzvahed, and since his parents didn't go or belong to a synagogue, that we could pledge him, and the National Fraternity never found out about that. But I do have a close friend to this day who, in joining her sorority in college, because she was Jewish, the sorority refused to knuckle under the pressure from the National Sorority Organization, and they pledged her, initiated her, and they were thrown off campus by the National Sorority Organization. So the experience that I had from an exposure to, young men who were Jewish really started in college. My own Christian experience, which had been so much a part of my youth, pretty much took a 4-year hiatus. So as I continued through college, we had lots of interchange with people that were Jewish and that became my close friends, as I mentioned earlier, some close friends for a lifetime. One of my Jewish friends invited me to his home, one of my still closest friends, and so I went to 2 different Passovers in their home in Jamaica, New York. That was, really a very exciting and very stimulating experience to be included in something as important as it was to his family.
When you graduated college, was it difficult to get a job then?
When I graduated from college, I was fortunate in being recruited and having a number of business opportunities when I graduated. But at that point in time, one company that did not invite me to Pittsburgh for an interview was Alcoa, which was an aluminum company, and I said to the recruiter at that time, I notice on your application you have singled out that you're supposed to indicate which religion you belong to, and I said, I think that's illegal, sir. And the interview, and it was illegal, the interview ended very quickly after that. But I was fortunate in being recruited by 5 companies when I graduated from college and chose the one that paid the most, which was Jones and Lockwood Steel. There were no Jews in my 18 person, nor any women in my 18-person class that was recruited. Uh,
Do you think there's a reason why Jews specifically were not involved in the corporate world at that time?
I think it was pretty basic. They weren't included, and they were being discriminated against, and there weren't things like quotas or, the people who had the power, wielded that power, and they didn't want any Jews selling steel. They probably at that era, in fact, I think it is true, there were some Jews at Jones and Lockwood Steel that were in the accounting department, but they weren't in the sales area where you would be out, meeting the public and selling your product. And it's hard enough to be a salesperson to feel that somebody's not going to see you because of your religious background or your color. It just was not a world that was open to Jews at that time.
Following that, I know that you were involved in the civil rights movement and you worked a lot on integration. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, it was at a time when the integration of some of the areas in the city of Cleveland were starting to be integrated. In our particular part of the city, there existed a practice called block busting, whereby a realtor would buy a home or rent a home to an African American, and then the realtors would call other people in the community, and they would be told that they were African Americans buying into the community, and within a 2 or 3 year period, the 600 or 700 homes that were in the area that we lived transferred over from white residents to probably 80% African American. My older daughter, Melissa, was in her kindergarten class the only white child. She was very blonde. The young children would play with her hair on the way home after school. And my wife and I realized that, our strong liberalness was really not being fair to our daughter, so we became part of that white flight and also left the city and moved to the suburbs. Within the process, there was a lot of effort to try to bring people of differing races together in seminars and meetings, and I became a discussion leader and a facilitator to do that. And along with that, I was the president of a settlement house, which provided social services to people in the inner city. So I was, very involved in a very important part of what was going on in society at that time.
So during the time of your first marriage, you had children, and was it like important to you to reconnect with your Christianity and have them be involved in the church as well?
Yeah, the lapse that occurred during college was renewed through the marriage. My wife had been a Roman Catholic. I had been a Presbyterian. We found a happy meeting ground in being Episcopalians, and I was very much involved in the Episcopal Church and very much involved in our children going to church, going to Sunday school, and I taught Sunday school, but we regularly attended church and became part of what we were utilizing to instill the values of religion and Christianity and Protestantism to our children.
So years later, you got remarried to Judy Roscoe, who was Jewish, my grandma. Can you tell me a little bit about the community's acceptance, her family's acceptance, and how they reacted?
Well, the first part was a conversation with the rabbi where the rabbi said, "Congratulations," and then she said she was marrying somebody who was not Jewish, and he said that he withdrew 50% of his congratulations. Mimi was concerned that since she worked as the fundraiser for the Jewish community for the United Jewish Federation, that somebody would feel uncomfortable that she was marrying somebody who was Christian. And so she spoke to her boss about that, and he indicated that there was no reason for her to, have any concern. And it ended up we were married by a rabbi in Washington, D.C., who had no trouble in marrying people of mixed faith. We both had the opportunity for 3 years to take the Melton course, which was an exposure to all sorts of Judaism from a historical standpoint and a spiritual standpoint and a liturgical standpoint. So, it was really very much part of what we were doing. Your grandmother was very supportive of my religion, although I was less active in the church than I was when I was living with my daughters. And she went to Christmas services with me. She went to Easter services with me, and I went to all of her religious services, and also for the holidays that were very important. I had some issues with her parents because they eventually turned out to love me very much, but there was a time when her father in particular was not at all happy that she was marrying somebody who was not Jewish. In fact, that would probably have been an understatement, and it's worked out really, I think, very well for both of us, for all of the people in the family.
Being involved in a Jewish family for so long now, do you feel connected to the Jewish holidays, and do you enjoy taking part in them every year?
Yes, I think it is. The basis of Protestantism is the Torah. It is something that is very easy for me to be involved with, and then on a different note, I find. I've said to Mimi before, there might have been a time when, in our marriage, that I would have been interested in considering conversion to Judaism, except that everybody always refers to the people who convert to Judaism as being converts and not being Jews of choice or other things of that type. But we are to be buried in the Jewish cemetery where it's permissible to have somebody who's Christian buried in that cemetery as long as they don't have a Christian burial service at that time. So, every bit of our life, most of our friends, and most of our exposure really has been with a Jewish dimension.
I know there was trouble during the time of my bat mitzvah. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, because I was not Jewish, I was not permitted to go onto the bima at your synagogue, plain and simple, which I was offended because of the very special relationship which you and I have, I think from a mutual standpoint. So it was very hurtful not to be included. It is what it is, and as much as I disliked it, it was what it was.
Is there anything that you would like to say to close out the interview?
I think number one, it's to me exciting, Maddie, that you are in this endeavor. To me, it's exciting to be included in this endeavor because I have such respect for you, but to be provide an opportunity to talk about some of the things that have allowed me to enjoy being included in the expanded family of your grandmother's family, and now your mother and father's family has been exciting, and I'm just happy to have had this opportunity to participate in what is really, I think, a very exciting project that you're